Everybody, welcome back. This is Capitalism Remix. We are really excited about this episode. You're going to get to hear from Dawn Myers. She's a Conscious Venture Partners portfolio company, Conscious Venture Fund 2 portfolio company, the CEO and founder of Richualist, a really interesting product for Black women in the beauty space. This was a really fiery and intense conversation with Dawn, and I can't wait for you to hear it. So, welcome back to the remix. Hi, Dawn.
Hi, Mr. Cherry.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm so good.
I'm so happy to see you.
Thank you. I was in the office earlier this week and I was so sad. No one was there. I missed you guys' faces.
Yeah, well, we're recording this first week in January, so just after the holidays, we give our whole staff off the whole week between Christmas and New Year's, so give everyone a little chance to recharge. But
Yeah.
we're back at it now.
It was also a snow day. It might have been unreasonable to expect people to trudge through the snow.
Yeah, for those of you who are not in Baltimore, we had a lot of snow here in Baltimore last week, about I don't know 6 to 8 inches.
Yeah, it was
So
crazy.
yeah, it was crazy, but it was beautiful. So
Yeah.
anyway, look, I'm thrilled to have you, Don. I was reading through your CV and your resume before this again, and I always forget. I guess I shouldn't, but I do forget at how what the amazing background that you've
Oh,
got. So I would love for you to just sort of tell everyone, your story, just, however you want to put that, but just your story from, where you started to your entrepreneurial journey, sort of how you got here. I would
yeah.
love to just have you go through that for
It's
us.
a circuitous path, so bear with me. But I am a lawyer by training. I went to law school thinking that I was going to be this advocate. Advocacy, particularly for people of color generally, but for Black women in particular, has always been a part of my fabric. And I went to law school thinking that I was going to fight the power. But what you find out very quickly in law school is that it's much less about fighting the power and much more about doing a lot of boring homework. And so, from my very first semester in law school, I started to suss out that the legal path might not necessarily be for me. And I really loved business, so I started taking all business, but specifically international business classes. I did some international study at University of Cape Town, and it was very IB focused, and I loved it. I loved it, loved it, loved it. But here it is, right? Before I went to law school, I had a choice. Are you going to go the MBA route or are you going to go the law school route? I went the law school route. And now
Okay.
I've got law school debt. And I'm like, how are we going to ameliorate this? I don't know. Right. So I get out of law school and I'm working on the Hill. Right. So that was my first job out of law school.
You went
And
to law school. You went to Georgetown?
I went
Right?
to Howard. I went to Howard.
Howard. Okay. Yeah.
Yes. So I go to Howard and then I end up on the Hill and uh, I kind of love it, right? Because here's the thing when you're in politics and campaigning, you're pitching all the time. And
Yep.
rhetoric has always been a big, skill of mine, right? So I'm liking it, right? And then, this was right after the housing crisis. And so there was a shortage of legal jobs. The legal industry really constricted. And so I was having trouble figuring out where I was going to go after the Hill. You can't make $16,000 indefinitely. And so I ended up very oddly doing some business development work for a legal company, and they needed people to go to BRIC countries. They had somebody in Brazil, they had somebody in India, they didn't have anybody in China. And so they sent me to China. And before I left
Wow.
for China, somebody said, if you go to China and you figure out the manufacturing game, you win life, right? So, I'm maybe 26 at the time. I've got this huge head of curly hair. And I get to China. I don't speak any Mandarin yet. People are looking at me crazy. And I learned enough Mandarin to be able to meander my way through the country. And I would get on planes and trains and go to all of these rural manufacturing facilities and meet with anybody I could who spoke even a modicum of English and just learn as much as I could. And did I, leave China fully, being a manufacturing, yeah, savant? No.
Right.
But I left China understanding what regions produced what products, who the key people were, a small Rolodex of folks in the manufacturing and product development space. And I got to be honest, I left China feeling like a failure because I, again, didn't become this kind of manufacturing pro. But I got called up to the Obama campaign, right? So now it's 2012. I head to Waukesha, Wisconsin. I do get out the vote for the 2012 election in Wisconsin. Really amazing time. And also, probably one of the most valuable times for my entrepreneurial career. Why? Because all I am doing all day is speaking and pitching and making a persuasive argument for my
Hmm.
campaign, right? So, the campaign ends, and now we got to find a job. And so I head back to DC. I end up
Right.
exactly where I don't want to be, which is in a large law firm. In that large law firm, I ended up on the business side of the firm, and I loved it. I loved it. We were pitching all of these, the biggest customers in the world. We're pitching Walmart and JP Morgan and the NFL. We had these really sexy cases. The Ray Rice case came up
Ah.
while I was at the firm, and we had just gotten these really, superstar partners to join the firm, and we're going out with the partners and pitching the clients. I mean, so exciting. But what I saw was I love the business side. I don't love the legal side necessarily. So I start charting my pathway out. I start charting an ethics and exit. I'm going to start my own company, right? So I start buying single family homes in DC and
Okay.
chopping them up into multi units, right? And I think that that's going to be my exit plan, right? So I'm now going to all of these entrepreneurship events in DC. I'm looking for mentors and people who understand the real estate game. But all I'm hearing is startup tech. And I'm like, what in the world is all of this tech stuff? We're in DC. We don't do that here.
Uh
But
huh.
I come to these events and these people are so passionate. It's not like the West Coast where everybody is trying to make $1 billion, right? These are people who are passionate about a problem, who are passionate about a community. And oddly enough, Jeff, I found exactly the tone and tenor that I was looking for in going to law school in the tech and startup space. These people are advocates. These people care about
Ah.
simple,
Okay. Yep.
you know? And so I fall into it, and I end up taking leadership positions in a number of ecosystem organizations in the DMV. The first one was Startups Ignite, and then I became director of the Veneta Project in DC. And
Oh
then
yeah.
Yep. And then I would go on to lead at Black Girl Ventures, right? So during that time, I got a crash course in startups, in tech, and the language, because as you know, this place has a completely different language about it. So I learned and I made some really great foundational connections. And somewhere along the way, I got this idea for a crazy startup in the beauty tech space. And it just so happened that I now had the contacts. I had the manufacturing background and contacts to figure out prototyping. And I also had this newfound passion for the space. And so I liquidated my real estate. I put everything that I had behind starting the company. And I don't know, 6 years later, here we are.
Yeah. So there's so much tied up in that. What there's a couple of things. First of all, University of Cape Town. How did
Yeah.
you how did you end up in Cape Town? This
Yeah.
is a sort
So
of an aside. just a little rabbit hole I want to go down, but I want to understand,
Yeah,
hear about
that
that.
was a really special time. So Howard has one of our professors, Professor Matalit. He is South African, and he's just renowned in Cape Town. And so he developed a partnership between Howard and University of the Western Cape. And we spent a semester there just going deep, and it was a really special time because, as you know, there's just so many parallels
Yeah,
between Howard
yeah.
and the
No,
university.
really interesting.
Yeah.
The other thing that whole your whole description told me was a couple of things. One, I run into so many founders who say, I'm an engineer, I'm a business person, yada yada, but I'm not a salesperson,
Hmm.
right? And then I think about Daniel Pink's book, To Sell is Human.
Mm.
We're always selling. We're
Yeah.
always selling. We're
Yeah.
selling ourselves. We're selling our ideas. We're selling ourselves to, potential mate or a
Mhm.
spouse. So
Mhm.
just when you talk about getting so excited about going out and pitching, I
Mhm.
mean, that, first of all, you are definitely an entrepreneur's entrepreneur, right? And I love that. But I also love the passion for getting in front of people and making an argument, right? This is why, you've taken that legal training, which is about you got to make an argument. You got to, you got to put the facts on the table.
That's
You got to
right.
sell this idea. You got to
Mhm.
sell this idea that my client did this or my client didn't do this, or this
Mhm.
is a good merger or this is a bad merger. It's all
Mhm.
selling. It's
Yeah.
all selling,
Yeah.
right?
And
And
I'll
and
add to that. Sorry, please continue.
no, no, go ahead. Yeah,
Well, I'll add to that. Selling is human, but it requires passion for the thing and also deep emotional and mental a really strong foundation around yourself. It's one
right.
thing when you're selling Barack Obama and these people who have the prestige and a whole machine around them. It's another thing when you are selling the idea that came out of your head and that you birthed into the world. If you are not a sociopath, there are necessarily going to be doubts. Is this thing good enough? Can I do what I say I can do, despite all of the no's that we know we're going to get in the ecosystem? And so you have to have both of those things: the passion
Yeah.
for the thing, but also deep, deep emotional and intellectual intelligence.
Yeah, no, it's a great lesson for all the entrepreneurs out there that are listening to this that, you I think that a lot of times, one, it's the doubt that comes in. That's why people say I'm not a salesman because
Yeah.
it's that self-doubt. But the other thing is if you're passionate about something, if you believe in something, if you have identified a problem that you think that you're the best person to solve it, it all of a
Hmm.
sudden becomes easier. And I love what you said, Dawn, about um, things being, I mean, I'm sure people will take exception with this, and I don't, so be it. But I love what you said about things being different on the East Coast, at least then, than on the West Coast,
Hmm.
because I think that you're right. Most founders that I encounter on the East Coast, they're not just chasing the next, the next sexy technology or this, that, and the other thing. They're not trying to become the Uber of this or the Facebook of that,
That's
right?
right.
What they're trying to do is like, hey, I see a problem here and it's wrong. It's the it impacts a lot of people. It
Mhm.
you know it causes their lives to be more difficult. And
Yeah.
I just don't want that. I want to make their lives better. And I
Hmm.
think that that's such a it's so connected to what I do, as you know, right? This whole
Absolutely.
idea of stakeholder capitalism. So
That's
that's
right.
really interesting. I want to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But so now take me into Ritualist. And how did you come up with that idea? Where did
It's
that come
okay.
from?
It is so shamefully cliche, Jeff. I am one night I'm watching Shark Tank and
Hmm.
I see that there's this lady. Her name is Tara, and she started this very famous Shark Tank company. She made a curler, and that curler was supposed to speed up dry time for people with finer textured hair.
Yeah.
And she comes on, this is her recap episode, and she says she made like, I don't know, $1 million in 8 months to market. And I was like, what are you talking about? Your her segment. still a very worthwhile segment, but her segment is so saturated. Meanwhile, particularly back then, we didn't have any tools or anything to make our time or our process easier or better. And so in that moment, I took a big legal pad and I sketched out a just very rudimentary drawing about what could possibly solve my problem. And the next day, I got up and I went to the uh, CVS and the Ace Hardware on Wisconsin Avenue in DC and bought up
Uh-huh.
all of the combs and brushes. And then I went to the Ace Hardware and I got wedges and hinges and soldering irons. And I came home and I duct taped and hinged and put together this really rudimentary prototype. And that prototype now is an actual tech enabled product that is fully to market. It's insane to me.
So talk about the problem, right? Because it's for
Mhm.
people who don't know what
Yeah.
ritualists and the most is. Talk
Yeah.
talk about that problem because I think it's really interesting that this is lots of venture capitalists who don't have experience with people of color. They're like, okay, maybe it's a problem, maybe it's not. And
Mhm.
there are so many stories of companies like yours turning into unicorns when people didn't understand what they were trying to achieve. So
That's right.
talk a little bit about the problem.
Yeah, the problem in a nutshell, you have to remember I was in big law at the time. I've always been considered myself something of an athlete, so I'm trying to get in workouts and all that stuff. Well, every time you work out, you sweat. Every time you sweat, you got to redo your hair. And I've got meetings in the morning, right? So how do I balance the 3 to 4 hours that I need to put in to style my curly hair? How do I balance my life with my hair? And what I saw was that we were all silently grappling with the same thing, right?
And
All of the
hold
black.
on, if
Mhm.
hold on, if you're just listening to this, you got to watch the YouTube so you can see Dawn's hair. Okay, so you can understand what she's saying. Yeah,
Yeah.
she's got a big head of curly hair,
Yes, yes. And
beautiful curl, beautiful black curls.
aw, thank you. And I've cut it shorter, but when I was that age, it was much longer. I mean, it took so long to do. And what I saw was that this was a pain point that every black woman I knew and a whole lot of other women, Arab women, Latina women, Jewish women,
Yep.
a whole lot of people were suffering silently too. You would be at work and you go to the water cooler. Oh my God, your hair looks so good. Tell me what you're doing. Tell me about your routine. How long is that taking you? We were always talking about hair all the time. And it wasn't because we were beauty obsessed. I am not beauty obsessed. I do not care what you think about my aesthetic. However, I do need to have a certain amount of polish to go into a business meeting and present my
Yep.
idea. And so for me, this was purely logistical. We end up running into a lot of things because we're in the venture space and people think about us as a beauty company. But at our core, what we're doing is we're solving the time issue and the logistical obstacles that come with managing curly hair. Right now, all the tools on the market are geared toward straightening our textured hair. But what
Hmm.
tools do we have that make the process of styling our textured hair and caring for our textured hair faster and easier? And that's where we come in.
So tell us a little bit about the product. How's it work? Just
Yeah.
sort of give us the basics.
Yeah. So I guess, magic here is the fact that this is a simple concept at its core, but it requires just enough sophistication to engineer the thing that, there's a little bit of a kind of moat around our company. So our tool is designed to streamline the process of detangling product conditioning and product application. Basically, what we do is we heat your favorite products in these cool little pods. Think of them as Keurig K cups, except for the hair and beauty space. Now, when I say that, I tend to get a lot of eye rolling, but literally, two of my board members are people who are from the founding team at Keurig.
Hmm.
Literally, the person who rolled out the Keurig K cup helped us design this pod. And basically, what we're doing is we're bringing that really amazing business model to the hair and beauty space. Now, when I say business model, it's not simply the fact that it's a razor blade model. It
Yep.
is the fact that we are able to partner with all of the other brands in the space, just like Keurig
Yeah. Yep.
with the Starbucks and the Pete's Coffee and all of their brands, right? We're doing the same thing, except in the hair and beauty space, so that you can pop in the tool, the product of your choice,
Yep.
and then you're able to warm up your products. That warmth unlocks a ton of value for our customer. It reduces the amount of friction necessary to detangle, which means you're doing more gentle detangling, which means you're doing faster detangling, which means you're getting more health as you detangle. And when you distribute this product, you're able to simply brush your products through your hair and detangle and style faster. That's it.
Awesome. So now, look, obviously, again, if you're watching this, you can see it, why Dawn thought about this for her. But tell us about, tell us about a little bit about traction, where you are,
Yeah,
because sometimes we solve problems for ourselves, and that's great, but there's not enough market for it. So tell us
yeah,
about traction a little bit.
yeah. So remember when I said I went out and did this
Hmm.
Frankenstein at home prototype? Well, I took that prototype to friends of mine and literally just threw it on the table. And I was like, listen, if this thing does what I think it can do, would you want this? Would you buy this? And at this point, I've raised a real estate company, right? Like I published a magazine when I was in law school. I think I've always kind of had like a little bit of an entrepreneurial thing in me,
Or a lot, or a lot.
or a lot, or a lot. So
Yeah.
I've pitched businesses before, and people, okay, that's great. But I saw people's eyes light up consistently. Every woman that I talked to wasn't just like, oh yeah, that's cool. They were like, oh my God, you have to make this thing now. And
Uh-huh.
so I did a little bit of, I sold my house and I started prototyping. And when I prototyped, I went back to my friends in China. There were some guys who I met when I was doing that kind of like, going to those
Yep.
rural areas. And they started giving me English lessons. And they started giving me Mandarin lessons. And I gave them English lessons. We're friends now, right? So I go back to those guys and I was like, listen, we need some prototypes for this thing. And here's the thing, there was a massive gap in understanding about the customer, the ergonomics of the thing. There was so much that was missing. But what we were able to do in those early days was test out certain variables, right? The big variables. Are we going to do this with a pod, or are we going to do this by, just kind of moving product from one chamber to another? Are we going to use a motor, or are we going to use some other kind of mechanism to move product through the thing, right? We were
Hmm.
able to
Yep.
test out those big variables to see what worked. And with each of those prototypes, I banded together a little group of maybe 8 women, and those women were our early beta testers. And every time I got a prototype, and these were early bad prototypes, but I would test them on these guys and they would give me their feedback, and then would go
Yep.
and we would make changes. And we did that until we got to a place where we had an MVP. And once we had that MVP, then we were actually able to commercialize the thing. Then we did another set of beta tests with testers to get more information, more refinements. And in this moment, even right now, I just got off the phone with my team. We're collecting data from our current customers and saying, okay, how many of these changes can we fit into the next batch of the mint without spending too much money, right? We're constantly in that process of data collection.
Yeah, this tongue in cheek reminds me of it. Y Combinator, they talk about how do you find that first customer? Who do you focus on? Narrow
Mhm.
down your customer, sort of your ideal customer. And they're like,
Yeah.
you'll know you found your ideal customer when you create a really, really bad MVP and they still hanker for it. They call those the hair on fire customers. So,
Yes.
this is really, really apropos for you, right? The hair on
Quite
fire
apropos
customer. They're going
indeed.
to use it. They're going to use it no matter what, right?
That's
Because it's such a big problem. So I knew that part of the story, but it's really important, I think, for entrepreneurs to hear, focusing on that, on that customer avatar, the single one, the one that's most important, the one that'll use your product even if it's horrible, right?
right.
No one wants to talk about a horrible product. But if you find that customer use your product even when it's horrible, then
Yeah,
you know you got something, right?
you got something. That's right.
So speaking of, tell us about Shark Tank. How did that happen? Because so we've had a couple of portfolio companies from Conscious Ventures go on Shark Tank. You're, I think, the second or third. Obviously, Hungry Harvest has been
Yeah.
on, and we've had some CVL companies, Conscious Venture Lab companies, Soap Pen. They seem to be doing pretty well right now. But tell us about your journey to Shark Tank.
Yeah, I never saw us going on Shark Tank. We were venture backed, and what we know is that the valuations on Shark Tank are totally different. And I wasn't sure that Shark Tank was necessarily the right avenue for us. But I'm gonna be honest with you, Jeff. We got to a place where we were running out of money, and we also got a call from Shark Tank. We had put in an application, months ago, very casually, and we started kind of going through the process. And the more we got into it and the more my investors introduced me to the Evans of the world and all these people who had gone on Shark Tank, I started to think about it a little bit differently. It's not just about the money. There are people who go onto Shark Tank and who don't get a whole lot of help on the other side, but there
Yeah.
are people who do. There are people who get the Mark Cubans and the Lori Greniers of the world to really latch onto their product and really help them grow. And so I said, listen, we need that kind of help. So we went on to the show looking for that kind of help. And I pitched, and it was the easiest. Everybody else always asks me, was it hard? Was it scary? After pitching venture investors as a Black
Yep.
woman in the beauty space for a CPG product, all of the no's and resistance that you get, uh, quite frankly, Shark Tank was a cinch by comparison. Because if you remember, right, Shark Tank is used to CPG. They're used to this kind of company.
Yep.
They're used to, right? So it was a completely different conversation. It was the most fun I have ever had in a pitch. And now we are backed by both Mark Cuban and Emma Grede.
It's so awesome. And if you think about the beginning of this conversation, how excited you get about pitching the NFL and pitching those big clients, it's not no surprise that you went on Shark Tank and killed it, because you did. You really crushed it. It
Oh,
was an amazing show. And
thank you.
we put Zay, Zay's my producer. He's here with us. I put the link to the recap for Shark Tank, so that'll be in the show notes
Nice.
for the podcast. So if you're listening, you want to go see Dawn really crush it on Shark Tank, we'll put a link there. So so now you got Emma, you got Mark Cuban,
Yeah.
you got Conscious Ventures,
Yeah.
shameless plug. Um, but you're still having, and you found a hair on fire customer that will use
Yeah.
this thing, whether it works or not.
Yeah.
You're an amazing, passionate entrepreneur,
Hmm.
um, and yet raising money has been difficult.
It's tough. It's tough.
It's tough out there. Um, Tell me how it's landing for you right now. How you're feeling about it. I know that you're still out in the market. We've just agreed to open up the round, so things are
Yeah.
happening there. But tell me
Mhm.
how it's landing for you, because some people get really discouraged
Yeah.
around this point in time.
Yeah, you know what? There are ups and there are downs, and you can really just kind of choose what you want to focus on. Some people will call that delusional. I think it's the only way to get through. The reality is, this has always been a very difficult product to raise for. Again,
Yeah,
this is a Black woman led company. I don't have to tell your audience the statistics around Black women getting funding. Then we're in the
yep,
beauty space, which traditionally isn't taken very seriously. Then we're in CPG. It doesn't matter what space you're in, investors are terrified of CPG. So we know going into any round that it's going to be really hard and that the cards are stacked against us. However, you have to focus on the assets that you do have. And the assets that I have are some really amazing advisors who are extraordinarily connected and who do appreciate the value of what we're bringing to market and who can connect us to some really great folks. So I just did a pitch last night, and that went really well. We're hoping that results in a check. We've been having some really great meetings. We're hoping that those result in a check. You can never put your eggs in the basket until you have something, until you're a little bit further along. But just in terms of the tone and tenor, it feels good in this moment. And I'll ask you and all of your audience to give us some energy, put some energy behind us because we need every bit we can get.
Yeah, you got all the good vibes coming from us. You know that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, the thing that I'm feeling and I really want to understand because, like you said, this is hard. I'm here in We're both here in Baltimore, and one of the obviously Baltimore's favorite son when it comes to entrepreneurship, Kevin Plank.
Yeah,
Used to have the signs up around town. The only way is through, right? That's
that's
the
right.
only way to get to the other side is to go through.
That's
And
right.
you're living that right now. So
Mhm.
what drives you, Dawn? What makes you get out of bed every morning with this level of passion? Because you definitely have it.
I do. There's so many tenets to that. I'll give you the main two or three. The first one is a deep belief in the need for products and services that improve the quality of life for Black women. Uh,
Yep.
Life is harder for Black women, right? Don't fight me, fight somebody else. You can look at any vertical, whether it's education or professional advancement or pay gaps or medical or health disparities. Black women are, despite getting the degrees, getting the education, Black women are at the bottom of the pile for every single one of those verticals. Life is harder for us. And I believe that Black women deserve products, particularly when we are over indexing on spend. Black women are the foundation of the hair and beauty vertical in the US, right? That customer should have products that serve her needs. That customer should have products that make her feel catered to. That customer should have products that cut down on her angst and her worry and make her life better. And so this manifests itself in products that are as simple as a hair thingamajig that make her hair styling process faster, but it extends out beyond this. The reality is, I am one of a handful of Black women in the tech enabled product space, and we need more of us making products and figuring out this space so that we can have products that make our lives easier, whether that is products that help you through perimenopause and menopause, whether those are products that help you with your dermatological concerns, whether those are products that help you balance your busy life, whatever it is, we need products that are aimed at our needs. And we won't get those products by waiting for L'Oreal or Procter& and Gamble or Unilever to make them for us. Procter& and Gamble and L'Oreal and Unilever, and this is no shade, but the reality is, and I know this because I've met with all of their R&D suites, they don't have
Yep.
people in their R&D suites who look like me. And so
Yeah.
when I met with those guys, right, and I tell them, hey, I got to make this product because this problem is a real thing. They look at me like I have three heads because even though they're making billions of dollars off of this consumer, they don't actually understand what the back end of that woman's pain looks like. And so Black women, people of color, women of color, we have to make our own solutions for ourselves. And the reality is, right now, I'm very lucky that I've been able to get you guys and others in the space to support what we're trying to do here. But the reality is, there are very few tech enabled products built by Black women or Black people that get that shot, right? So we have to get points up on the board, as our mutual friend Matt Conwell would say. We have to get points up on the board so that
Yep.
more people can come into the space, so that we have paved a little bit more of the pathway so that folks can get further and produce more.
My guy Mac, he's one of the best. Mac runs Rare Breed Ventures here in Baltimore. We love him. He's doing great things. You're right. I was going to say, preach, girl, preach, because you're hitting your own point here. Let me extend this question a little bit farther because you know how we think about the world. I mean, the product and service is one thing. You're
Mhm.
serving those customers. Tell me, how do you see this, that 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 philosophy, that worldview manifesting itself in the way that you're going to run this business as you
Mm,
grow it, right? How
yeah.
does that, have you thought about that? And if so, how does that come together?
Yeah, yeah. So, ironically, the fact that this customer is underserved, listen, you got to find all of the negatives and spin them into positives. And the
Yep.
reality is, the fact that this is a Black woman run company, that this is CPG, all the things means that we've been undervalued compared to the other comparables in our space, the other kind of, tech enabled beauty hardware companies in our space from the very beginning, which means that our shareholders, for better or for worse, they're getting really great value, right? A lot of what keeps me in the game, a lot of what keeps me making those moonshots, I could have a long time ago pivoted our business model to just sell very simple liquid products and make
Yep.
a great living for myself, right? We push through to figure this space out. One, because there is massive upside for our investors. In getting massive upside for our investors, we make exactly the point I intend to make in this space. Not only can Black women build big businesses, but serving the needs of niche communities and underserved communities is also good business. We think about it in terms of really just making sure that this small budding company is a conduit towards the equity in the space that we envision. I am small potatoes, to be very clear. But already where we are, we've moved a number of Black women who never would have had a shot in startups. They've come to our company. They've figured out this is what a startup is. This is what tech is. This is what operations in a tech startups look like. And we've moved them into other positions. We are personally responsible for getting two Black women VCs into funds after going through a friends and family round and a seed round with us. That is not small, right? And so when we think about the impact that we have on our communities, often we hear founders say, well, when I get my exit, I'm gonna give back to the, you
Hmm.
gotta do it now, because there's
Yep.
no guarantee that you're going to make it to the promised land. And even if you do make it to the promised land, who knows how big that exit is going to be. You got to find ways to make your vision and make your values manifest in all of the tenets of your business: who you're hiring, how you treat those people once you hire them, how you think about your roadmap, all the things.
Mic drop for me, right? This is a mic drop for me because you are preaching every. This is why we invested in you, right? Um, and it's one of those things. And there's, we've talked about, having you come to the boot camp, which you did this year, which was fantastic. But it's one of those things. Once upon a time, I said, well, we're looking for founders who know how to operate a business with us from a stakeholder perspective, which is just what you just described.
Mhm.
And a good friend of mine, Tian Wong, who runs Connectpreneur, he said, that's not what you're looking for, Jeff. He goes, you're actually looking for people who want to do that, who
Yeah.
are aligned with you philosophically, but you're going to give them the tools to do that because they already did it. They wouldn't need you, right? But
Mhm.
having someone who understands all the things that you just said about why this is important, it's bigger than you, right? It's bigger than the product.
Yep.
It's about something much bigger, and that's why we're so happy to be partner with you, to be one of your investors, and frankly, for me, to be one of to be a friend with you, because I learn from you every single time I sit down with you.
Yeah.
I learn something new,
Yeah.
and it's what drives us all as a
The
community.
feeling is
Um,
mutual. I have to just give you a plug. There have been so many nights where I'm just on the brink, and you come over and give me just a few words that get me through. Or, I'll come over to you with a problem that I feel like is completely unsolvable. And you will go through your phone, find three people who have the answer to the problem immediately. And it's so helpful to have people in your
yeah.
community where you can be vulnerable, where you can talk about your hardships, your obstacles, and they're willing to open up their social Rolodex to make it happen.
Yeah, well, I'm happy that we can do that, and I know we've got a time on the schedule the delay has been mine because I'm traveling a little bit, but we'll get to the issue that you want to solve. So I'm looking forward to having that session.
No worries.
Um, Let me drop into one more thing. Um, there's a, you can tell just from this discussion and from what you've talked about how you're supporting the community. There's a lot of people look up to you. Um, Tell me, who are the leaders that you look up to, people
Mm.
that you want to emulate, you want to be like, and what's the thing that sort of connects you?
Yes. Oh gosh, there's so many. Where do we start? The first one that comes to mind is Sheila Johnson. Sheila Johnson,
Hmm.
co-founder at BET. I just love her because like we're built similarly. She's also very, very petite, but
Yeah.
she also co-founded this multi-billion-dollar company, and she didn't get her kudos for the work that she put in for a very long time, right? I think people are just starting to understand the power of Sheila Johnson now that she's building her own brands on her own. But, you know, I've always really looked up to her. I think that her story is inspiring from a business perspective. It's also inspiring from a woman's perspective. She has been through things that I think many of us can in some way relate to. And watching her, as she would say, walk through fire, I think
Hmm.
inspires us to be able to do the same. There's so many. There's Michelle Obama. You know, these people are really highfalutin. However, you know, listening to her books has been so helpful. I mean, it sounds cliche, but it feels like at those exact moments where I'm experiencing fear, she's talking about fear in my ear in that audiobook. It feels like here's the thing, entrepreneurship is just as much spiritual as it is a professional practice. You have to become the best version of yourself to be able to lead a company the way that I aspire to lead a company. And that requires people who have really great work ethic and who are really smart and who are really ambitious, but who also have high emotional intelligence and who can lead you there. And
Yep.
Michelle is just incomparable in that respect.
No, that's fantastic. You could pick a lot worse, right? Those are people that and they're both pretty approachable too, right? You say quote unquote highfalutin, but they're both people who strong women who came from pretty modest backgrounds to to the highest levels of whatever they chose to do. So and the I think the message there is so can you, and so
That's
can lots of other people, right? That's the
that's right.
message there.
Hmm.
Um, Dawn, you and I both spend a lot of time, as you just talked about earlier, in and around the ecosystem in Baltimore, and the both the startup ecosystem and just the general business ecosystem here, both supporting founders, trying to raise money, trying to build a product, dealing with all the things that go with that. What do you think needs to happen in Baltimore or in Maryland or on the DMV over the next, I don't know, 5 to 7 years in order for us to sort of achieve the level of prosperity and
Hmm.
shared prosperity I think you and I both care about, that I think that you and I would feel, okay, we're on track to do what we ought to be doing here. What do you think needs to happen here in Baltimore to make that a reality?
There are a lot of answers to that question, but I think the one that's worth honing in on is we need to think about tech and entrepreneurship like Baltimore and not like the Valley, right? I
Yep.
think a lot of investors, they're trained at wherever they're trained, right? They go to Aspen Institute and they get the same talking points and they get the same kind of rubric for what kinds of companies are investable. But the reality is, um, you know, uh, in our spaces, our VCs are not as capitalized as West Coast VCs. They just aren't. And so we have to think about, well,
Right.
what kinds of companies can our differently capitalized ecosystem really support? right? And so, I think we need to start thinking about it differently. I think companies like mine are really well poised to win. That doesn't mean that they're not complicated. That doesn't mean that they don't have their obstacles. But we have a lot of the resources we need to make a CPG company win in Baltimore. We've got manufacturing here.
Hmm.
We've got the creative community here. We've got great influencers between Philly, DC, and New York, right? We've got a lot of what we need in close proximity. Let's
Yep.
use the resources that we have to make that work rather than trying to make the VR coin for marijuana that might work on the West Coast. Let's stray away from that and let's be a little bit more grounded and realistic here. I think that's the
Yeah.
first thing. The second thing that I'll say is we need to pick a winner, right? Um, Uber didn't become Uber because those guys were just more meritorious than the founders that we have here in the DMV. Uber, Facebook, Airbnb, you name it, they became who they became because the right people picked them as the winner and got behind them. And what that does is it gives you wings, it gives you momentum to get to the next level. And then the next level of VCs get behind you and raise you higher. I think what we're looking for, I think often in the space or in this region, is we're looking for magic. We're looking for the founders who can magically do it, whip it out of the air.
Mm.
And sometimes there is a little bit of magic involved, right? There's that je ne sais quoi that allows that founder to go into a crowd and sell and sell and sell, right? There's that je ne sais quoi where that engineer gets the technical side in a really magical way. There's an element of magic, but the reality is we have to pick those winners. We have to see their magic, and then we have to actually support them. What happens often, particularly with companies that are founded by people of color, is they say, "Wow, that person is brilliant," but I'm going to wait until they get there. You have to
Yep.
be part of their getting there.
I hope we need to promote this episode to all of the venture capitalists and the providers here in our region because that's the message they got to hear. They hear from me all the time, but
Mhm.
it seems really self-serving because I'm trying to raise money from them,
Right.
right? I'm
Right.
undercapitalized. I need more money.
Hmm.
But they have to listen to founders, right? They have to listen to the founders. So I think that's a really elegant way to think about this, Don. Thanks for that. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Look, I am so thrilled that you were able to join us today, and I know you got a lot on your plate. So I got one more question, and I'm going to let you go. But
Okay.
the one more question is, it's what we call the desert island discs. So if you were stranded on a desert island and you only had 5 songs. Now, I tell people they can pick 5 songs or 5 albums because sometimes 5 songs is hard for people. We're creating a playlist, top CTR playlist. So tell us your 5 songs or 5 albums. I'll let you go either way, Don.
Oh my gosh, that is hard. Okay. Um, the first one, and I picked this one because I got a cancer diagnosis a couple of years back. And when I got that cancer diagnosis, I was trying to figure
Which we
out,
didn't even get to talk about.
we didn't even get to talk about it. It's okay.
We'll
No
leave that
worries.
for the next podcast.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. When I got that diagnosis, I listened to this song running around the harbor every day, trying to convince myself that I was going to be able to pull keeping the company alive off while keeping myself alive. And that song was Nice by the Carters, by Beyonce and Jay-Z.
Okay.
And I'll just kind of give you the kind of snippet. There's the chorus line where they're singing, I can do anything. I mean, they literally just repeat, I can do
Yeah.
anything over and over again in that song. And it made me feel like I could pull it off. And so I think if I had to build a kayak and build fires to get off of this island, I think I would need all 5 of those songs to be Nice by the Carters.
All 5.
All 5.
Damn. All right, there you go. That's a first. All 5, one song. Listen to it all the time. Building
That's right.
fire, building a kayak, and to get off the island.
Hmm.
See, that's an entrepreneur's answer. Don, as always, I love talking to you. You bring the energy, you bring the heat,
Oh,
you bring the passion. So thank you so much for joining us here, Capitalism Remix. We can't wait for people to hear you.
Thank
And
you so much for having me. Thank you for
yeah,
investing in me. Thank you for supporting me. Thank you for seeing the value in what we're bringing, and
more
thank you for having me.
more to come. All right. Thank you, Dawn.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Oh my, what an episode. As I said in the beginning, fiery and intense. Dawn is just such a joy to speak to. She brings the energy every time. She's out there fighting a good fight, and it's not easy, as you heard, for a black woman in the CPG and the beauty space. But she's just doing an amazing thing. So I think that was one of my favorite episodes yet. So much energy, so much passion coming from Dawn. So that's it for today. Thanks for listening. Hope you come back soon. We're going to drop these. Don't forget to check out the link to Dawn's Shark Tank episode, and we're continuing to build the Desert Island Disc playlist. But until next time, we'll see you back here on the remix.